Hello. I'm going to deal with two things today. Well, three, actually. One of them is the Tommy Robinson conviction, which came, I have to admit, as a huge shock to me. I'm afraid I was psychologically stuck all Friday because of the shock. I just couldn't believe that was going to happen. Well, it did. And then there's the Andy No beating, which happened a while ago. But I'm talking about them both because I believe that both things are connected. And in this case, they're connected by the third element of this video, a book by William Golding called The Lord of the Flies. Now, I don't think many people have actually read the book recently, although most, of course, do know about it. And some people have seen the film. I think maybe there's been 2 or 3 films made. But I want you to remember this. When you see a film of a book, you see the world of that story through the eyes of the director, not the author. So although the story is the same, usually, the emphasis can be radically different, depending on who's pushing the actors around and choosing the angles. For those of you who haven't read Lord of the Flies, it's a novel which starts with a shipwreck, or rather a plane wreck. How the boys got out of the crashing plane and why they have so little memory of it is a bit of a mystery, and has attracted some criticism, I might say. Also, why only the boys escaped and not the pilot, and one presumes at least one other adult who was there as a supervisor. But only the children survive, apparently, and it seems as if they were being evacuated from wherever they lived or whatever school it was, because of the Japanese invasion of the Far East during the Second World War. The point is, the children seem to have no memory of a previous life. Everything, by the way of cultural markers, has disappeared, and they're on an island making it up as they go along. I've spoken about the dangers inherent in ditching your culture and, tearing down statues, refusing to study literature written by people you consider not to have the correct attitudes, that sort of thing. And I have pointed out that it's dangerous, but I'm not the only person who has. And my warnings about this sort of behaviour are warnings that come not only from my own experiences, but from what I've observed by reading a lot of books, because other writers and thinkers have said similar things. And as I keep saying, good literature tells you something about human nature and the human condition. And I doubt there's much better about the nastier side of human nature than The Lord of the Flies, and what happens to people when their cultural structures have been destroyed for one reason or another. The Lord of the Flies, by the way, is littered with biblical references. I'm not sure how many people realise that. If no one's taught you about the Bible, then you wouldn't get what the book was about. But the first clue is in the title itself, because the Lord of the Flies in the original Hebrew was Baal Zebub, which was the Hebrew name for a Philistine god, Baal meaning Lord and Zebub meaning flies. It might have been a mistranslation by the Hebrews who wanted to denigrate this god, but anyway, Baal Zebub, it remained, and came down to us here in English as a demon called Beelzebub. So we have at the start of this story the name of a false god or a devil, and that should give us some idea of what the book's about. The society the boys make up starts when one of them picks up a conch shell. Obviously the most intellectual of the boys, a chap called Ralph, he picks up this conch shell and uses it as a horn to call the other boys together. You could call this the early phase of development, like the gathering of the Hebrews to hear the law. It was a society, and it calls to mind the blowing of the ram's horn in Mosaic Judaism. Anyway, under that structure, all were supposed to play their part, and all were supposed to obey the conch shell, which personified the law. But that didn't last very long. Jack, the hunter, and his instant anti-intellectual appeal to the emotions is more to the taste of many of the boys, and they follow him. And they follow him into a religious cult that has to do with a dead god hanging from a tree. Now, you can take this as a criticism of Christianity, or you can, which is my preference, take it as a comment about the way human beings warp things and turn them to evil uses. The dead god in this case is a pilot who bailed out of an airplane during a dogfight, but was dead by the time his parachute got caught in the trees. The interesting thing about that was that the really nasty monsters, which the boys were beginning to believe in, started off by coming from the most innocent of the kids, the group of what is referred to as the little uns. It was their imaginings that pushed the older boys into more of a mess than would have happened had they been able to talk rationally about the fix they were in. The society breaks down. Jack's hunters descend into complete savagery. They kill some of the boys, among them Simon, whom you could regard as the rational priest. He's the one who starts to understand what's happening, but he's torn apart, literally, before he manages to convey the feelings to other people. And then Jack and his hunters start fires to smoke out the ones who fled into the cover of the trees. And you've got Armageddon, with the whole island on fire. And the last one who has any sort of intellectual grasp of the situation has been driven out of the jungle by the fire onto the beach and knows he's just about to be killed when God steps in the person of a British naval officer. A British boat was passing the island. They saw the fires, which had been set by Jack's hunters, assumed they were distress beacons, and came to rescue the boys. Now, I want to remind you that although the boys see the British officers as upholders of law and order, those officers were at sea near that island because they were, at that time, locked in a hideous and bloody conflict with the Japanese. You see, it goes all the way up to the governments, doesn't it? The officer asks the boys why a British group couldn't have organised itself better, and he doesn't understand what's been going on at all and assumes they've all been playing Coral Island, which was a popular boys' book at the time. It was a 19th century book about three shipwrecked boys on an island. The leading boy, by the way, was called Ralph. Not a coincidence. And being British, they create a civil society, defeat cannibal natives and ravening pirates, and manage to rescue a native girl from her angry father so she can convert to Christianity. No prizes for how Golding saw that story. But back to Tommy Robinson and Andy No. In the case of No, he is, like Ralph, the intellectual, telling the howling mob what they don't want to hear. They cook up untruths about him, and that justifies their hunting him to death. I'm talking about Ralph, by the way. Is there any difference between the way Jack's hunters acted towards Ralph and his friends and the way the so-called Antifa mob were acting towards Andy No? Well, I don't think so. There were other people who got the same sort of treatment, by the way. There's a dreadful video showing them hitting an old man over the head with a blunt instrument. I think it must have been an iron bar of some sort. And there are others. If I can find the clips, I'll put them up here. In Lord of the Flies, they've whipped themselves up into a frenzy. And until they're brought under control, they will just get worse and worse. We know that. The problem is, who's going to bring them under control? In the case of Andy No and Brian Leach, you know, the chap who was sacked by Asda for sharing a Billy Connolly clip, the authorities seem to be unable to control the situation. All they can do is cave in, which means that this behaviour will persist in just the way it persists and gets worse in Lord of the Flies. But in the case of Tommy Robinson, we have something even more monstrous, because the howling mob isn't a group of hyperactive, overgrown teenagers. It's the government itself and the intellectual elite, like the news media and the entertainment industry, who are ecstatically mobbing the outcast. And as with the message of The Lord of the Flies, which is a book that shows you that however civilized we are, however much we use computers and wear suits, we have the capacity to get ourselves stuck into a feedback loop of evil, which we cannot stop until someone steps in. But who's going to step in for Robinson? There's still a chance, you know. His sentence hasn't been decided yet. We're all talking about him going to jail, but, well, I just wonder if the British law will stand against what is obviously the pressure of the British government and will decide that he's served enough time in jail already and will think of some other way to save face without actually getting him murdered. I don't know, but we'll see. Meanwhile, I can recommend The Lord of the Flies as, well, a warning for what happens when society chooses an outcast and things get out of control. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe, and if you wish to donate, click the subscribe star link where you can make a one-off payment or set up a regular contribution, or I have a PayPal account at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.